Well, hello, everyone. My name's Don Ward. I'm Chief Executive of CIB, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the latest in our series, CIB in Conversation. We talk about CIB as the global network for collaboration for innovation in the built environment. And to all our viewers today or who are watching the recorded version, whether you're members of CIB or guests from around the world, I extend a very warm welcome to you, and I hope you'll enjoy the conversation. For more information about what we do, have a look at the website here and find out how we add value for our global community. This series of conversations is all about meeting some of the personalities from leading players and thought leaders in the world of built environment research. And today I'm delighted to welcome Keith Hampson to join us. Now, Keith in CIB is best known as our president. He took over in that role last year in 2019 as president at the World Building Congress, and he'll serve until the next World Building Congress, which is in Melbourne in 2022. Today, we're going to have a two-part conversation. The first part is about his own research career, how he got into the field he's in, and his research interests. And then in part two, we'll talk about his role as president of CIB, his vision for what we do, and the key initiatives that he is focused on. So Keith, welcome to CIB in Conversation from your office there in Curtin University in Perth.
Great to have this opportunity to have a chat with you, Don.
Great, thank you for joining us. So Keith, let's start with a quick overview of your career and your own area of research expertise.
Thanks, Don. It's interesting, you know, thinking about it, because I like not to be able to be well typecast, and it's the case that my background has a variety of phases and formal qualifications that have led to my position today. And can I say at the outset that I'm delighted to have the opportunity to help reshape the CIB going forward. Look, my career, Don, has started, I guess if I wanted to go quite a way back, I grew up on a farm, and as one of quite a few boys and a girl, where my father had an expectation that I, like his father, would become a farmer. But I'm sorry to have disappointed him, and I went off to school and had every motivation to do anything but farming. So it was the case that having been skilled in some of the practical aspects, it's no surprise that in my teens I developed an interest in engineering, and that wasn't entirely shattering to my dad, because at least it was practical. I mean, had I become a philosopher, I think he would have run the tractor off the cliff. But the interest in engineering and the way in which I watched construction of freeways that were taking shape around the southern part of Brisbane at the time, between Brisbane and the Gold Coast, was the Southeast Freeway. And as a teenager, I would watch excavators and graders and scrapers moving vast volumes of soil and creating a freeway. And that was during my teen years, and later in high schooling, I was fortunate enough to have earned a place into a university and went off to become an engineer. But the times were such that I needed to have got a scholarship to have gone to university, and fortunately I was able to secure a scholarship to be a water supply and sewerage engineer at the time with Brisbane City Council. So over a period of 6 years, I had the chance to do investigation, design, construction and asset management of Brisbane's water supply and sewerage systems. But it was also important over that time, I think, to have been able to work with people who were clearing the sewers, people who were designing projects, and people who were constructing and managing these projects. So from an early age, I was lucky enough to be in a management role, looking after people from a blue-collar background on one hand, and as time went on, in a more junior management capacity, looking after some of the more junior designers and constructors. So it was a great introduction to civil engineering. After civil engineering as a graduate, I chose to head off, and having in mind that I was going to become a city engineer or a shire engineer, went off to gain some additional experience. And you know, one of the great mentors I had at the time was the director of QIT, Queensland Institute of Technology, where I studied. And he said to me, Keith, don't worry about money, just go and chase experience. 2 years here, 3 years there, and I did that. So for 2 years, I went to Mount Isa and looked after some of the grading, road construction and maintenance crews that covered the area from Mount Isa through west to Northern Territory and north to the Great Australian, to the Gulf of Carpentaria in Australia. And it's an area the size of Tasmania. Terrific experience, met some real characters across days and nights of my time in that part of the world. And after 2 years, decided it was time to chase some more experience, having done some roadworks, drainage and simple building experience, but learnt a lot about working with people from all walks of life. I then returned to Brisbane and worked with Port of Brisbane Authority building the new container terminals at the mouth of the Brisbane River. So for those who fly into Brisbane from across Moreton Bay, you look to the left, you see Fisherman Islands. Much of that in the late 80s was still being reclaimed. Today it's a thriving container and bulk port that I had the really the privilege of working with in those early days, where civil engineers were revered in the ability to turn you know, mud islands into ports. 5 years there. And then I had the opportunity to head on to the UK as part of a Confederation of British Industry scholarship and work for the Channel Tunnel Consortium at Dover, and indeed in Victoria up in London with the joint French and English design teams. Great multicultural experience, great ability to have benefited from working and living in another country. And of course, combined with the Australian connection with the continent by getting a Volkswagen camper van and camping in all sorts of car parks and dead-end streets throughout Europe. But a great experience. And after 5 years in Port of Brisbane, after a year working for Atkins in London and in Dover, I then came back to Australia and decided that it was time to do a MBA, a Masters of Business Administration. I then took the leap to then go into, you know, paralleling with that, to go into an academic role where I was teaching basic construction and water engineering to civil engineers, and then building and quantity surveying in the new construction management and property school at Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane in Queensland.
Okay.
Great couple of years, finished my MBA.
Well, let me just pause you there, because
Sure.
it's interesting, after, as someone who spent 13 years in industry, you know, what made you take that step? I understand the move to an MBA, but a lot of people in industry who take an MBA would still see themselves as staying as industry. What was it that attracted you to move towards academia?
Sure. No, it's a good question, Don. That was around the early 90s in the recession of the. Remember those? They were gentle recessions.
Yes. Yes.
Very gentle recessions. And at the time, I ran my own consultancy as a consulting engineer and project manager. And I felt pretty lonely at home many times as a sole trader. And being used to working with people and having more action around than was in my kitchen at home, it was important for me to get out and actually meet people again. So in parallel with doing my MBA, I was also teaching. And over that 2-year period, look, I met interesting people from all over the world. Universities are the sort of places that attract people who have a whole range of interests and backgrounds and are enthusiasts in their own areas. And to be really honest, I got hooked into this ability with a brown paper lunch bag to go along and listen to someone who was talking about civil rights in Namibia, and then talk about someone who was thinking about reinventing plutonium and nuclear power stations to engineering. And it was a fascinating mix of people and enthusiasm of the thirst for knowledge, I guess, kept me there. I was offered a full-time job, and part of that really shone a light on the fact that I needed, if I was going to genuinely progress in an academic career, that I needed a doctorate, a PhD.
So if I've been in the industry 5 or 10 years after graduating, why should I be thinking about academia, or is there a particular attribute or strength that I ought to look for in myself that would suggest that I could make the same transition that you were able to from industry into academia?
And look, I think everybody's different. Everybody's different, but for me, of course, one of the drivers was wanting to do things better, wanting to do things differently to what had traditionally been done, and a dissatisfaction with just doing things tomorrow like we did it yesterday. And so that thirst for doing things differently, smarter, better, cheaper, safer, was really important to me. So in that sense, I was at a crossroads. In my mind, I'd envisaged that I was going to run a larger consulting organisation, but in my heart, I was enjoying academia, and I had to make a choice to invest in some years of further study after having done an undergraduate and a master's. It was really clear to me, and made very clear to me by the leaders in the university at the time, that if I was seeking a career in a research or academic post, I needed to have a doctorate. So I was particularly fortunate that at the time, QUT had developed a series of internal scholarships for particular staff members to undertake degrees in overseas institutions. And I was fortunate in applying for that scholarship, was awarded the scholarship, and gained entry to Stanford University in the US. And I have to say that 3 years at Stanford University in the heart of Silicon Valley was transformational, really. And I say that, and I know that's probably an overused word today, but it really did highlight to me the importance that industry could have in university research. Having come through industry in Australia, and as you say, 13 years in industry in Australia, and then 3 or 4 years in an academic role, the interface between industry and academia was superficial, to say the least, but it was almost antagonistic in a sense. That was in no way beneficial to either industry and their learnings, and academics and researchers in terms of their engagement and, can I say, research for the real world. So there was a great acknowledgement that in the US system, that the engagement between industry on one hand and researchers and universities on the other was symbiotic. Both in a personal sense, in a financial sense, and certainly in shared outcomes of research. So if there was one of the most important messages, if you like, that I took back to Australia, was that importance of industry research relationships.
Well, that's a nice link both to the purpose and raison d'etre of CIB, Keith, but also tell us a little bit about the area of research then that you undertook your PhD in.
Thank you, Don. I just happen to have here this 3 kilo document.
Yeah.
This red document is titled A Technology Strategy and Competitive Performance, a study of bridge construction. And so this study looked at the aftermath of the Loma Prieta earthquake in California, where in 1989, 1990 had been many destructions across the Californian bridge network, and unfortunately many deaths as well. And fortunately, as I was there in the early 90s, both the federal government, the Federal Highway Authority, and the Californian government through Caltrans had allocated vast sums of money, significant funds for research, development, new construction methods, and trialling those sorts of methodologies in practice. So my research, together with Caltrans and the Department of Transportation in Texas, was looking at the way that firms can use technology strategy to engage in business. And in essence, what I meant by technology strategy was largely some of the things that I've just mentioned. It's about the engagement with university researchers, with manufacturers, with consultants, and partnerships with clients to make sure that what they were delivering weren't just low bid contracts slipping through on minimum standards, but how we can drive better outcomes, particularly in the post-earthquake era of that time, to drive better standards and higher levels of resilience in infrastructure. But importantly, some of the measures that I developed and used in that research were about relationship measures, relationships between industry and university researchers, and how we might look at processes for developing those and measuring, if you like, the intensity of those relationships. And I'm really pleased to say, of course, that a more heightened approach to the use of technology strategy as defined was indeed associated with improved performance in the marketplace from a series of bridge construction firms across California.
Okay, so Keith, this is fascinating because we can see where your sort of young interest came from in terms of industry. We then see the move to academia and the symbiosis of academia and industry. So what then took you into, this field over your left shoulder is the SP NRC banner. What brought you into the field of running that type of industry academic organization? So how, and I know you went back, you and I in fact first met when you were at QUT running the predecessor, I think, of your current organization. So tell us about the development, if you like, of your mid career.
Don, you and I met in 2005, I think, in London, as you were running Constructing Excellence, and at the time I was leading the CRC, the Cooperative Research Centre for Construction Innovation. So briefly, the detail around that is that on returning to Australia, I really had to make a difference in research connections with Australian industry, or leave in frustration and go back to the US, because I was very tempted to do that. Fortunately, there was a fertile field in Australia at the time. The Australian government was encouraging the development of these new entities called CRCs, Cooperative Research Centres. And after a few years of building industry contracting business within the university, what was called the CSIRO, the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation, and QUT Construction Research Alliance, with some excellent colleagues from CSIRO who had combined with QUT, we found that we had had enough resources and enough experience in working together to take the next step. But I should say one of the key stepping stones there was a project that the Australian government gave us through the Construction Research Alliance, which was called the Acton Peninsula Development Project. So this report from 1999 is the final report for the Commonwealth of Australia on the case study of the construction of the National Museum of Australia. And that case study examined for the first time the building alliance process, contractors, designers and clients, imagine that, working together for better outcomes in a procurement sense. And my colleagues at the time, Derek Walker from RMIT, Renee Peters from QUT and myself, started writing about this, relationship-based procurement strategies for the 21st century. And Derek and I went on to produce what I trust is a significantly referenced book across the industry on procurement strategies, examining, amongst other things, the basis of procurement as a study in construction and how alliance contracting can, under the right circumstances, assist in providing better outcomes. QUT, CSIRO, RMIT, University of Sydney, University of Newcastle, together with the Australian government and state governments, we formed a bid for the CRC for construction innovation. And together with my head of school at the time, Tony Sidwell, with Derek Walker and myself, we worked together over a period of some months and over a period of some years, and developed the successful bid for the CRC for construction innovation, which, when I met you, Don, in London in 2005, was in mid-flight. So 2000 to 2009, over that 10-year period, we brought together industry, government and research across 28 organisations around Australia, with key links internationally through Salford University, through other organisations, Stanford University, for example. We brought together international practice, including constructing excellence as our international partners, to what was the initial founding of industry research as a national centre in Australia. And it's been a great legacy that we've built on ever since.
And in terms of that, those areas of research, which are still hugely relevant, and all sorts of parts of the world still look to what you've done in Australia. I think, for example, in my own interest in alliancing, and which still came back onto the agenda in the UK in the last 5 years or so. What do you think is the most interesting recent finding in this area that our viewers ought to know about, or for that matter, the policymakers ought to know about?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Don. It's come a long way since 1999, but one of the enablers for better and closer working relationships. And I mentioned a minute ago that the client, the designer, the constructor, and ideally the asset manager for the lifetime of the facility could and should be integrated in the process throughout. But one of the enablers for that process to occur successfully is integrated ICT, integrated information and communication technologies. At the time, Don, in 1999, Lend-Lease, a global firm active across the Americas and Europe, were running in a web-based integrated communications tool. But today we see many organisations out there with BIM or digital engineering, linking planning, design, construction and asset management, and document control and progress control and cost management processes in seamless digital tools that support working together. But not only do they support working together, but given that they're digital, they support remote working together. So we're now in a position, and inevitably in this conversation we'll come to COVID. In a COVID world, the ability for an industry like construction, and really we should be thinking not just construction, I mean if we think of property, planning, design, construction, asset management as being the built environment, the ability for those disciplines which make up this industry in its entirety, for them to work together effectively in what might be called contractor engagement or early contractor involvement or alliance contracting. A precursor is largely the ability, particularly today, for the ability to work across the supply chain with an integrated digital, call it a mechanism to work together and even to work together remotely and globally, so that we can run projects now in a global environment much more effectively than we ever could.
Keith, I have to say it's been a very consistent thread in this conversation that you've talked a lot about the whole life cycle of built environment, right from when you were a municipal engineer in your early career, from design all the way through to asset management. So it's a very striking consistency actually in the way in which you speak about built environment and multidisciplinarity. I think we'll bring this part of the conversation to a close in a minute, Keith. And we just had a quick question from one of our viewers live here, who's just saying, sort of, you know, how do you see your career developing in the next 5 years, if that's an appropriate time horizon to think about?
John, what a searching question to end this part of our discussion with. You know, I've been privileged, and I use that word at the beginning of our conversation, but it's absolutely the truth. I feel very fortunate to have been given an environment in which my learning was encouraged, an opportunity to put some of those questioning practices into the workplace, and then found a way to actually work through learning, skill development and research, and then indeed research leadership. And I should say at this juncture that the CRC for Construction Innovation has advanced into on this side, the Sustainable Built Environment National Research Centre over this last 11 years, and remains an influential national industry-driven research centre. This centre is a very enduring legacy of the CRC period, but also it's a new model in looking forward of industry, government and research relationships. So I envisage that Sustainable Built Environment National Research Centre with our industry, government and research partners across Australia will continue for some time. There's no reason why that doesn't continue. But my other interests around national and global leadership in the built environment continues. So, for example, my recent election to the Australian Academy of Technological Sciences and Engineering, ATSE, has provided me with an ability to serve on the National Executive of the Infrastructure Forum. And my work with the Australian Institute of Company Directors has allowed me as a fellow to mix with other members of professional directors across other industries across the country. And indeed, my work with Engineers Australia has allowed me to mix with other fellows of the engineering fraternity across all disciplines in a way that really has provided a good foundation for my role as CIB president, and being able to connect people at senior levels across those sorts of organisations. And I look forward in the CIB, Don, in working with you and your team in building senior relationships across other organisations globally, but also encouraging the skill development and research skills that are required to build our industry. So I see myself continuing to do this, Don, in slightly more targeted ways, as, for example, a director on firms going forward and organisations like the CIB that I've mentioned. And can I say in closing, I'm delighted to have had this chance to work with you in building the CRC for a sharper and better future. And I think we're on a good track together. Thank you.
Well, I agree, and thank you, Keith. Just before we close, though, because you brought us there onto the subject of professional bodies, and yes. You know, a lot of our viewers today and watching this recording afterwards will be PhD students or early career researchers. So, what would be your message to them about the value of professional bodies?
Well, yes, my advice is jump in. My advice would be to, if you understand that the world is connected, and if you understand that in that connectivity are networks, and I can assure you there are, professional bodies both provide you with personal and professional connections that can be happy and satisfying at a personal level, but in a career development level can be pivotal in the way that you can look towards advisors and mentors and influencers in your career and in your personal life, of course. So I can only encourage those involved in the different disciplines that make up CIB, in the design, in the construction economics, in the engineering, in the asset management, in the legal, in the safety areas, to get involved in professional associations. I have never regretted an hour that I've spent involved in what might be sometimes mundane-ish professional association meetings, when they lead to the awards evening at the end of the year, or the opportunity to help shape future leaders in selection panels, for example. It's a very satisfying connection. And I might say, both on a personal level, where friendships and sometimes are very much part of the equation, but also professional development, career progression. So I would say go for it, embrace it, and you know, the future's in your hands in that sense.
Thank you very much. I think we had a slight sound interference there, but I don't think it was too bad. So I think people will have been able to hear what you were saying, or work out how you were finishing that sentence. Right. Thank you, Keith. I just want to finish with a formulaic question to you. We're asking all our guests for what we call top opportunity. So you've just left us with a message, a powerful message to students and early career researchers. Thinking now about politicians and policymakers around the world, sort of in one sentence, what would be your top your message, that the top opportunity or challenge for them that you'd like them to be thinking about?
Good question. Today, we are seeing around the world some of the rebuilding efforts, or the stimulus packages, and the challenges to our national economies around, for example, social and physical infrastructure. I really urge politicians to invest in the skills and capability development, very much in concert with the investment in the physical infrastructure. A construction project is an absolutely welcome addition, particularly in this context in the built environment field, to creation of jobs and keeping people off unemployment queues. But if that's not associated or integrated with skill developments at a trade and professional level, then the benefit is just like a sugar hit. It's very short, sharp, and it probably doesn't cause long-term benefit or bring about long-term economic and human benefit. So I think it's connecting skills and capability development with physical infrastructure. Thank you, Don.
That's great, Keith. Thank you very much. And that's a lovely contribution to what is a little bank of top opportunities that we're collecting together here through these conversations. So that brings us to the end of this, what is the first part really of our conversation. Keith, it's been a great pleasure to talk to you in your capacity as Chief Executive of the Sustainable Built Environment National Research Centre, to understand, you know, how your career developed and what your research interests are. In part two, we're going to talk much more about the CIB and in your role as president. But for now, we'll call a halt to this conversation. And I can only say I found it fascinating. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope our viewers have also enjoyed the discussion. How can they contact you, Keith, if there's any questions that people want to, or if they want to be in touch with you? Do you want to give out your email address, or should they contact you about
if a person with initiative couldn't find my email address on the web, then there is a serious problem, Don. CIB, Sustainable Built Environment, Curtin University, for starters. So I'm happy to connect with people who are interested in having a chat.
Keith, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thanks, Don.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to CIB in Conversation with Keith Hampson. I'm Don Ward, Chief Executive of CIB. And in part one of this discussion, we were talking to Keith about his role as CEO of Sustainable Built Environment National Research Centre in Australia, and his early career, his professional interests, his links with professional bodies and so on. In part two, what we want to do is focus on CIB. He has been president of CIB since the World Building Congress in Hong Kong in 2019, and he'll serve in that capacity until the next World Building Congress in Melbourne in 2022. So Keith, welcome back to the discussion. You've been involved in CIB a long time. So how did you first get involved?
Don, it has been a long time. It's been an enjoyable 25 years, and 25 years just sort of rolls off the tongue. But in a quarter of a century, I've had some great CIB moments, and it has allowed me, in a very real sense, to progress in my research career, but also help me build personal relationships around the world. So it's been a fundamental part of my life for the past 25 years. My involvement came as I returned to Australia after completing my doctoral studies in the US. And at the time, we had at my university a new head of school out of the University of Salford, Professor Martin Skidmore. And Salford University were very strongly engaged in the CIB in a European context, and through people like Peter Brandon and Martin Skidmore and others, particularly out of the University of Salford. I was invited to spend some time at Salford and also got well engaged in the CIB as what you could say in an early postdoctoral career was an early an ECR, an early career researcher. So in those days, the active groups were W65, Organisation and Management of Construction, and W55, Construction Industry Economics. And those two groups often had joint annual conferences and gatherings. And I can well remember, Don, cruising down the Ohio River in Cincinnati as the University of Cincinnati hosted the W65 event in 2002, and meeting colleagues from across the world, but also making friendships and remaking friendships with people like Kalle Kokkonen from VTT at the time in Finland, and Jan Brockner from Chalmers University, Peter Brandon from Salford University. And these stalwarts of construction research were prominent and very much supportive of the CIB initiatives back then. Since then, the the rest is history. I've slipped into a range of working commissions and task groups, John.
And how would you say you were able to use that involvement, Keith, to advance your own career? You know, you've described some of the values, but how did it actually help you demonstrate or achieve the career advancement that you were looking for?
Yeah, no, good question. The networks are important, and the personal good times of having a beer with CIB colleagues after a particularly grueling day at a conference are memorable, but they don't advance directly your career. Publication is important for universities. Publication is an area that I was able to participate in and help drive in the CIB. In fact, in anticipation of your question, I've got a couple of green publications here with the CIB logo on the front.
Indeed,
This particular publication, led by a couple of great guys out of the National Research Council of Canada, Andre Manso and George Seedham, Innovation in Construction, an international review of public policies from 2001, came out of a working commission or a task group at the time called TG35, Innovation Systems in Construction, kicked off in 2000. And over that couple of years of the task group's formation, my colleague Karen Manley and I put together a chapter called Construction Innovation and Public Policy in Australia. And that was a great start or a base foundation of looking at how publication through the CIB could leverage into career opportunities. And at the time, I was leading the CRC for construction innovation. So having a baseline of funding agencies for construction research in Australia and comparing how that might be provided for across the globe was very helpful in terms of helping the career in research leadership, but also in building publications.
So you're able to collate and draw on sort of global expertise. So it's an opportunity for global benchmarking then, by the sound of it.
No, not at all, Don.
Which is compelling for policymakers and research funders, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's fair to say that from membership of that task group, then taking the initiative, and at the time with Professor Peter Brandon from Salford University, we stepped up and formed a group called TG58, Clients and Construction Innovation, in 2006, that came off the Australian leading work called Construction 2020, a vision for Australia's property and construction industry, co-authored with Peter Brandon, which again has got a terrific publication hit. And since then, Task Group 85, R&D, Investment and Impact, with my colleagues Judy Kratz and Adriana Sanchez at QUT, and a task group that's just wrapped up, Task Group 90, Information Integration in Construction, again with Adriana Sanchez from QUT and my colleague from Chalmers University in Sweden, in Rasmus Rempling, Integrated Information in Built Environments, another publication, but this time as a co-author of a book, as well as a number of chapters. It all adds to the publication repertoire, but also adds to the ability to build reputations in this space. CIB has been fundamental to that, Don.
Two things have just occurred to me, Keith, as you're talking there. One of them is, and I should know the answer to this, to be honest, but I'm going to plead that I've only been chief executive 6 months. You've named at least 4 working commissions there that you personally have been involved in. Are you exceptional that you were involved in so many different commissions, or how common is that researchers, and where's the value to those who are thinking that they only, you know, they've got their one research interest, therefore there's one commission they want to get involved in? You've obviously had value from being involved in several. Is that something that you'd suggest to others?
Horses for courses, really. My primary involvement in these have been through the task groups. Task groups typically have a working life of 3 years, So really since 2000,
Yeah.
3-year blocks of consecutive and value-adding research over those years in 3-year blocks hasn't necessarily meant that I've been involved in those consecutively. These have been sequential. So my involvement predominantly has been in these innovation in construction and R&D in construction initiatives that have been developed through the task group processes. Some others, and if I can recommend perhaps, involvement in specific working commissions, a deep and long-term involvement in that might be akin to a continuing involvement in a theme of research through task groups, for example. So I don't think there's any one way that I might suggest is better than another. The real message is get involved and contribute and help in the leadership of these initiatives for strengthening both the global research effort, but also bringing that closer to home and in your own research institution, helping to provide valuable outcomes.
Keith, that's great. Thank you. And thank you, by the way, for educating me in terms of the subtle, less than subtle, I guess, distinction between working commissions and task groups. That's excellent. The second thing that occurred to me was these publications look beautiful. You know, they look lovely on your desk there, and I think they were probably on the bookcase behind you before then. But how do we stop publications like this just being beautiful additions to the bookcase? And actually make sure that the research community and that the industry, the wider industry practitioners and so on, benefit from the knowledge that they represent?
Very good question. Look, I think that certainly my stream of interest is around making a difference to industry practice.
Yeah.
So for me, the value in providing in inputting as a researcher or leading research at a project or as a centre in, for example, the Sustainable Built Environment National Research Centre is about making a difference. So the engagement, and I mentioned this publication, Construction 2020, for example, the engagement of the industry associations throughout in developing the map of how we might carry out the interviews, the questionnaires, the workshops, the way in which we've interpreted the results into how to make a difference of interpreting outcomes for industry improvement. And I might say the implementation into government policy is all about how to make a difference. So I have, I guess, both on a personal level, but also in terms of the research centres that I've led, always been of the view that our fundamental goal is about helping improve industry practice, and the publications have also provided, appropriate credibility in terms of academic progression. The two can go hand in glove. There's no doubt about that, and I encourage researchers towards that dual outcome of academic and industry value.
Thank you, Keith. We had a little bit of interference on the line then, but again, I think it was okay. I don't think the problem in understanding what you were saying. And I'm looking to my producer, and I think she's giving me the nod. So we'll carry on. We won't record. We'll allow that to stand as it were. One of the things I'm interested in, Keith, is conferences and CIB's focus. You referred to cruising down the Mississippi and how much fun that was, and the value of the personal networking and so on and so forth. In the current era, in the era of COVID-19, there's no opportunity for face-to-face conferences. We're all Zooming, or we're using Microsoft Teams, or other such systems are available. How would you promote the value when we get back to being able to hold face-to-face conferences? How are you going to sell that to people to persuade them that it's worth the extra time and the extra budget, the financial commitment to come to these conferences, rather than continue just to be using Zoom and just to be sharing what wouldn't be necessarily now beautiful green books on your desk there, but they would be PDFs on the screen. What's the added value of face-to-face conferences?
Don, I value very much the chance to have a virtual connection at times when it's impossible to do anything differently, and I think that's been a great addition to the repertoire of organisations like CIB, and CIB, I'm delighted to say, has embraced digital communication through its webinars, through its virtual board meetings, and I want to highlight the successes that you guys are making in upgrading our website, for example. It's a terrific step forward. But for me, and I know for many people who are energised through personal contact, there is no substitute for face-to-face contact. And, you know, I have been known to have a glass of red wine over dinner, and it's very hard to enjoy and talk about how good the dinner was and to enjoy the camaraderie around the dinner table on Zoom. There are certain shortfalls of the digital world. And so it's fair to say that some of the publications that we've talked about, some of the engagement in task groups and commissions have been made that additional step more enjoyable and, I might say, valuable and productive by the after formal connection engagement is over. The informal chatter, the ability to socialise after meetings is nigh on impossible in a virtual environment. It's critical in the face-to-face environment, and I only urge CIB members to attend conferences in a face-to-face mode as soon as it's safe to do so, and I look forward to engagement in that, I trust, from next year and beyond. So it's pivotal to that long-lasting relationship.
Thank you, Keith. And yes, it does feel, doesn't it, that COVID-19 has really jumped us, or has advanced us maybe 5 years in terms of the use of technology for these sorts of sessions. It seems also, and I know you've been in discussions, Ron Wakefield is leading our planning for World Building Congress 2022. And one of the tricks, probably, would you agree, is going to be how do you combine that added value of face-to-face conferences, but still with the opportunity for people to engage virtually, remotely. You know, that trick of combining both approaches in a hybrid model. Do you agree that's sort of an area where we've got more to learn, really? I haven't necessarily seen it done very well yet by anybody, but I hope that CIB will be in the vanguard of developing a good model or good models for how to do that hybrid approach.
No, I think that's true, and I believe that there's a genuine market for both approaches, for both modes. It is inevitable that some prospective attendees may not be able to attend for whatever reason in a face-to-face mode, and rather than miss out on the opportunity altogether of engaging in the various sessions or some specific sessions, they will be given the opportunity in the World Building Congress in June 2022 to participate in those. But more important will be those who are able to make the commitment to be there in a face-to-face mode. I mean, the ability to make those personal connections and to build discussions around a formal session into an informal session, and to take those discussions technically and personally and professionally further in an informal setting, over a cup of coffee, over a glass of wine, over dinner, is absolutely critical. And I just encourage every attendee or every person who might be engaged in the World Building Congress 2022, June 2022 in Melbourne, to make the effort to be there face-to-face. For those who can't, absolutely understand that situation, and we look forward to making those sessions available in where they're available in a virtual mode to be as helpful and informative as possible as well.
Brilliant. Keith, thank you. You make a compelling case. Well, I hope our viewers agree that you make a compelling case. Let's just take a step up, Keith. Let's give you the opportunity to, you became president. Well, it's actually 15 months ago now. You're almost coming up to halfway through your term of office. I don't know if that had struck you before, but anyway, let's give you the opportunity to set out your vision of what your 3-year term, your vision for CIB, not just in your presidency, but in the longer term.
Sure, Don. In Hong Kong, in the World Building Congress 2019, hosted by Hong Kong Poly, and a great conference it was as well. When I was fortunate to have been elected as president of the CIB for the 3 years starting in June 2019, I really highlighted 3 goals. One was to restore research at the centre of the CIB. Number 2 was about ensuring that the member services is reinforced, or that the member is reinforced as at the centre of the CIB, and therefore to ensure that that happens through improved member services. And 3 is to assist in the establishment of the machinery to deliver items number 1 and 2. And so those 3 goals, I'm really pleased to say, are well advanced. And I'm delighted since the beginning of this year in 2020, Don, that you've made the welcome step into the leadership as CEO of the CIB, that we're in I'm confident now and feel every day that we're in a new world of being able to move forward with a CIB that's being re-energised and modernised every day. So I'm confident that we're getting the energy levels up to a level where we can actually be proud of where we're going. But in the particular sense of restoring the research to be the centre of the CIB, I'm really pleased that through Michael Beam, the Program Director, that the coordination and the communication between the task forces and the working commissions is like it hasn't been, I would suggest, before. And also at the other side of that is the communication between the researchers and the board. And for the last couple of board meetings, we've had direct communications enabled by our virtual board meetings between coordinators, task group leaders, and other researchers with the board. So I'm confident that that side of our remodernising, reshaping the organisation is well advanced. But on the other side, if I can say, Don, students to build the research capabilities of the future, early career researchers who will turn into future commission or task group coordinators, who will turn into publishers of documents, who will turn into global research leaders and will lead the CIB board going forward, have been also absolutely had their role reinforced in the new CIB. So again, under the leadership of Albert Chan as Student Committee Chair, and with Michael Beam and yourself, we've been delighted at a board level, and as President I've been delighted with the progress that we're making to reinforce the role of today's students being tomorrow's leading researchers and commission leaders. So that engagement and their connection with the board is pivotal. And I look forward to the next half of my presidency, Don, in continuing that and seeing the early results of this re-energised, modernised CIB.
Well, thank you, Keith. I'll just ask you another question about that in a second. But for those people listening, a little tip for you. It's always a good idea as the chief executive to listen very, very carefully to what the president says are his priorities and make sure we're focused on those. And so I'm glad you set them out so clearly. And yeah, I hope that people agree with you that we can start to evidence progress on all three of those priorities. So you finished there particularly by emphasizing students and early career researchers, Keith. I mean, as in the remaining term, you know, working up to World Building Congress 2022, what's the deliverable that you think we can achieve by June 2022 that would really add value for the student and early career researcher amongst our community?
Yeah, Don, when I look at the wide range of task groups and working commissions across the disciplines that make up the built environment, and therefore the CIB research landscape, there would be numerous opportunities, I think, that that the commission and task group coordinators can identify to more integrally involve students in activities, not in a superficial way, but in an integrated way, and co-authorship of publications, co-leadership of initiatives, and dare I suggest co-leadership of the commissions themselves is a very a strong message to early career researchers and students as they develop into early career researchers, that the CIB provides a pathway for them, both within the CIB, but also assisting them in their research careers, be they in research institutes. We talked previously about the National Research Council of Canada, for example. The Building Research Association of New Zealand is another one. And many of our members across CIB are not universities, but research institutes. Yep. Those researchers and the development of their careers through the networks and the subject content leadership that CIB offers, together with university researchers, can provide a great platform for early career researchers that will lead to, and we talked before about the World Building Congress in June 2022 in Melbourne, and I trust that's in everybody's calendars as as you listen to this. We will see more students, more early career researchers having a greater role in the CIB sessions, and I trust sharing valuable experiences and learnings across the peer groups that they represent, as well as vertically integrating across experienced members of the task groups, coordinators and the board than we've ever seen before. And I look forward to being part of that strengthened student involvement in World Building Congress 2022.
Keith, you describe it beautifully, and what strikes me is that the idea of horizontal and vertical integration of CIB's core programs in this way is very much the outcome of the three initiatives which you set out in 2019. So I think that's a great way of describing the progression of CIB, if you will, into the next era. Again, viewers, note, CEO listening to the president, I hope. Keith, we referred earlier to COVID-19 in the context of stopping us having face-to-face conferences. Does it, are there other challenges or even upsides which occur to you that you know, students and early career researchers perhaps ought to be thinking about? I mean, you know, if I was a PhD student right now, I might be a little bit concerned about what my next steps in my career were going to be. You know, we read daily of challenges around budgets in the research sector and in universities. So do you have any advice for young people in our sector, and in terms of actions that they might be taking, given the challenges that the pandemic has presented?
I do, and I offer this advice in a context of understanding that there have been far too many of our global citizens afflicted by COVID, and unfortunately, of course, many have died. It is a serious, it's a serious stage of our world's history, and the pandemic has made us rethink a whole range of things. But that means that more than ever, we shouldn't be sitting on our hands. We need to be proactive in the way forward as to, in our particular context in the CIB and for researchers in the built environment, to identify where we can help the future of the world. And, you know, that might sound a bit grandiose, but the future of the world's in our hands. You know, humans spend 90% of their time in the built environment, whether they live, work and play. I mean, the built environment is really the core of human existence. And so whether we're involved in working commissions that might include, for example, W99, safety and health in construction, I mean, it's pivotal to the way in which we deliver products of the built environment, whether it's homes, buildings or transport or energy infrastructure, for example, or perhaps W78, information technology for construction. I mean, how are we stepping up our information technology for delivering construction products and services in a more efficient way that have been informed by, tested by, and we've seen relatively robust outcomes in the digital world, and how that can be applied to a better construction. And I guess as another example might be building healthy cities, Task Group 86. How is that group's initiatives being leveraged in the post-COVID world, when we get to that? How are we actually shaping the research that we're well positioned in, that we've got the markers, we've got the benchmarks of research in those dimensions, but how are we actually shaping that into make it a COVID contribution so that the global recognition of the value of built environment research is absolutely crystal clear. This is a great opportunity for us.
But nicely put, Keith. I mean, you mentioned 3 or 4 working commissions. CIB has over 40, of course, covering the entire diversity of research topics in the built environment. And I guess you'd see implications of the pandemic that need to be considered by all of those commissions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that there's an opportunity, you know, with challenge comes, with adversity comes opportunity. And I think the opportunity of each of our research groups to make a contribution in this space should be grasped.
Well, that feels like a pretty good final message, Keith, but perhaps you've got one final soundbite, as it were, one sort of final closing thought about the CIB and the future that our viewers might like to take away with them.
Don, there are 2, I'm sorry to say. The first one that we haven't mentioned is the ability for us as an organisation to make to build a stronger financial foundation for the CIB going forward. And I'm delighted to share with members that we have formed a task group, a board task group that has been initiated through the board and through your leadership as CEO, that's chaired by our Vice President, Mark Hustak from Purdue University in the US, looking at new sources of funding to provide a stronger financial base for the CIB, and looking towards larger investments that might be made in this organisation's future, and cementing, of course, our organisation for a much longer period, so that we're, in addition to membership fees, we also have a stream of income from additional sources. And I thank Mark Hustak as Vice President for his initiative in leading that task group. But in wrapping up, I really want to highlight the opportunity that I touched on before, and that was for a return to normal, better than normal, World Building Congress 2022, June in Melbourne, in the great state of Victoria in Australia. As a member of Sustainable Built Environment National Research Centre, RMIT has stepped forward to take this challenge, and I thank our board member Ron Wakefield for taking on that challenge, and I really look forward to the CIB and the broad built environment community coming together June 22 in Melbourne and driving forward the agenda, which is building our future. Never more relevant than it is now, and I look forward to seeing you at that event. Thanks, Don.
Well, thank you, Keith, and I'm sure our viewers really appreciate the last half-hour conversation. I've enjoyed it. I've learnt some more things about the value of CIB, I have to say. So I appreciate your time and effort. I appreciate this. I don't want to sound sycophantic, but you know, I appreciate your leadership of CIB at a personal level. I'm sure our members do. You're an excellent leader of the organisation, and I hope people have seen, you know, how that is and how that comes across.
It's been my pleasure. I've enjoyed my 25 years, and I feel this is an opportunity to genuinely do put back, and I look forward to continuing our good work together. And it's been a pleasure having this chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. So to our audience, if you want more information on this event and on Keith's work or details of other events in the series CIB in Conversation, you can get that information from the website, which you can see here on the screen, and other communications such as the newsletter. Anybody can sign up to our newsletter on the website. You don't have to be a member. We want to keep you informed. We want to make sure that you know what's going on. You know, hopefully that you can see the benefits of joining and tap into the value that Keith has, you know, set out for us so clearly. Finally, you know, and for anybody who's been watching this webinar, we encourage feedback and suggestions at any time. Just get in touch with us. Loads of ways to do it, as Keith has said earlier in our chat. And you know, suggestions for future guests. Who do you like to hear from in this format in future? Please let us know. But with that, I'm Don Ward. This has been CIB in Conversation. Goodbye.